spending a year in branch libraries, and this was in New York City.
Largely, yeah.
And what did you see? What were some of the things that surprised you? And you became a regular, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, because I work in universities also, most of the time I've spent in libraries has been spent in school libraries, and I was not an avid user of branch libraries. I grew up in Chicago in the 1970s and 80s, and I don't know how much Chicago is. Is Chicago here today? I know the ALA is in Chicago. That was a little bit cheap because the entire ALA staff is in Chicago, I know. You know, the branch libraries in Chicago in the 1970s and 80s, you've got Chicago roots, they were not, it was not the highest time, right? It was not the peak moment for the library.
There were challenges.
Yeah, and so, you know, that wasn't the way I was raised. And so having kids in New York City helped me understand that there was a resource here. I live very close to the Jefferson Market Branch Library. 6th Avenue is this incredible place. I fell in love with a library on the Lower East Side of New York called Seward Park, which is a great old Carnegie building. And you know, I didn't understand that there's even something kind of architecturally significant about a library that you know, is kind of elevated, has these stairs coming up, and so but even just by walking into the library, you know, you're elevating yourself. You're leaving the mundane world where we spend most of our time. And there's something beautiful in that vision that I think Carnegie and other advocates of the library had, that the library would be this great institution that would allow people who were living in small apartments and working in factories and very busy all the time to elevate themselves, right? To be in a place with big windows and to have time and space to improve themselves. And so I guess the first thing I would say is that world is very much alive today. And you know that, but I didn't understand the extent to which the branch library is still a place where massive numbers of people are going all the time to make something more of their lives. And that could be the enormous numbers of immigrants I saw who were there learning English or studying for citizenship classes because they wanted to become American and they wanted to be part of this incredible democratic project. And amazing numbers of young people who are going to the library after school because the library has become such an important place to study and focus and to get your grades better and to learn about college and to do these things that are exactly what we want young people to do. One of the really amazing things I saw and I read about in the book is this Library Lanes Bowling League. That must have been the most surprising thing. Spoiler alert for those of you who have not quite gotten to chapter 1 yet. But like about 25 years ago, there was a great political scientist named Robert Putnam who wrote a book called Bowling Alone. And Bowling Alone, I mean, first of all, let's give it credit for being the saddest 2 words that anyone could put together. Honestly, I've been trying to think about 2 words that conjure up such a sad image, and I haven't been able to do it. But it made the case that American civil society is collapsing. People are doing more things on their own, and that kind of image of Bowling Alone became the great metaphor for the collapse of civil society. So huge shout out to Brooklyn. Brooklyn, are you here today? The rest of them are out raiding the $9 ice cream cones with salt flavor all around Washington, D.C., which is what you do in Brooklyn. So Brooklyn came up with this idea that they were going to do a virtual bowling league for elderly people who were at risk of isolation. And so once a week in the Brooklyn branch library system, they invite older people to come. If you're on the team, they give you a jersey for your branch. They hook up an Xbox. They call the branch manager of the rival libraries in the borough, and the teams from the different boroughs compete against each other with an Xbox. So everyone's doing virtual bowling on an Xbox. And I have to say that, the games are more exciting than the Yankees. I had so much fun watching these bowling matches, and it was beautiful to see people. And my work on this subject started years ago. I'd written a book about a heat wave in Chicago where hundreds of people died, including a lot of older people who died alone. And I realized when I was down in these library rec rooms that I was spending time with the people who were most at risk of dying alone in Chicago. They had every reason to be home and alone and isolated and lonely, and instead of that, they were smiling and laughing and throwing each other high fives while bowling for strikes on an Xbox. And it's just the most beautiful thing. And for me, that captured something which is like, think about how many relationships happen because of the work that you do in a library today. You know, think about all the people who are engaged, you know, mentally, psychologically, socially, culturally, because the library is there and it's open and you're there to help them and their programs. And I think too many of us just take that for granted. And I certainly did before I started this book.
And you mentioned too, there was a little competition too. It got a little rough.
I mean, these bowlers are not messing around in there. I mean, this is serious business. No, I mean, look, I'm a soccer dad, okay? I spend my weekends going to soccer matches all over the Northeast. And you know, I scream and yell at the best of them. No offense to my 13-year-old who's a remarkable soccer player, and his team is remarkably fun to watch, but if you're looking for true entertainment in American culture today, you gotta open up a bowling league in your branch basement. It's very hard to beat that. They're fun.
And you said it's a tournament and
Yeah, the branches compete against each other. And I think that Brooklyn would like nothing more than for Manhattan to get on board and for Queens to get on board. I don't care where you are from today. I mean, imagine if we could start a national virtual library bowling league today, we would really have accomplished something for American democracy.
all right. And you might even have, what is it, the draft?
The bowling draft.
The bowling draft and all that. So
I think we could really do things together, Dr. Hayden.
So, all of these wonderful things, you could see them, you were an advocate with the restructuring and all that. But as you, on my way, the reason why I'm asking this is I got a chance to go through these events and these old friends meet new friends, and there was a common theme though about the budgets being cut.
Yes.
And people being very concerned about their place with city and county services and that. Any advice on getting these outside? It helps to have someone that's not part of the library be such an advocate.
Well, thank you. I mean, let me tell you that one reason I wrote this book is because I think we need to have an argument. You know, I think we need to have a language that travels from inside the library to the halls of Congress. I think we need to have, you know, good evidence that places like libraries are vital social infrastructure and can make the difference between the low quality of life and high quality of life in the neighborhood, or even between life and death when they're critical events. And I think we need to be bold about the way we make this case. And I know that some people in the world are nervous about the fact that libraries have transformed. You know, you still find people who say like, well, why aren't they reading as many books? You know, hardcover books, when in fact, you know, in many places we are. But the truth is that the library has transformed, and it has transformed because it has become modern, and it has evolved with the time. And you know, frankly, I wish some of our other great institutions had the capacity to transform and modernize in the way that the library has. And the library is a dynamic and living and breathing institution, and it suffers because we haven't really invested in the physical plant, right? And so libraries have physical infrastructure needs that can be overwhelming at times. But what's happened in libraries as institutions is extraordinary. And that's I think a story of openness and creativity from the rank and file up. And so what I would argue is that we all understand that the infrastructure that we have to keep ourselves in the modern world is out of date. I've traveled around the country, I've traveled around the world in the last year, and I have yet to see people tell me, like, actually, you know, Eric, the infrastructure where I live is amazing. We are going to be investing trillions of dollars in infrastructure. It's inevitable. And the argument that I make, which I hope you will agree with, is that libraries are critical social infrastructure. That libraries are precisely the kind of institution that we need to bring people together, whether they're people who might otherwise be isolated or people who might otherwise just be polarized and spend time with people in their group. Libraries are places that bring all kinds of people together. Even when you have a very affluent community, you find that the library is the site of diversity and interaction, where people have experiences that aren't pre-scripted. And for that, they are really extraordinary.
I asked that question also because I've had experiences where I've been the only librarian in the room, on a cabinet meeting or different things, local cabinet meetings or different discussions. And I'll never forget one time I inadvertently messed up. Elected official was talking about kids after school and that they had passed the library after school and there were no kids hanging out. And I said, they're in the library. And the person said they didn't see them on the street. So they're inside. I didn't get invited back. Everybody looked for to help when you're in situations when you're the lone person, the lone advocate for libraries.
You know,
difficult.
Yeah, and I can relate to that experience, actually, because it's interesting. Like as a social scientist and someone I write a lot about cities. People who write about cities, they love, the coffee shop, the diner, the barber shop. There's this whole literature on the third space. Which are all great spaces, but I had one of these experiences too where I was like, oh, there's the library. Oh, I'm sure that there's a million books about the library and the role of the library in the neighborhood. The urban sociology must be stacked with books about it. And I kind of went through my library and I couldn't find them. They weren't there.
Index, and I'm always hopeful. And then I was like, okay, well, email prep, maybe they put it under E. Maybe, yeah. No.
It's so funny because there's this thing about the Washington, D.C. read, which is you pick up the book and you go to the bibliography and you look for your name. Of course, the librarian read of a book is to go to the index and look for the library. I mean, what could be more perfect than that?
So I think we have time for a few questions.
That would be great.
If you'd like to, because when I looked at some of the chapters, I noticed though that libraries are prominent, but they weren't the only thing in here. How did that happen?
Well, it's true. Can you explain the error of your ways? Look, I will be honest, when I started working on this, it was going to be a book that was just about the library. And I had this idea, maybe I'll call it, the library book. I think that could work. Fortunately, someone else last year used that title. I understand it's a pretty good book too. No, it's an amazing book that Susan Orlean wrote about it. But the truth is that I wanted this book to be an argument about the central importance of the library in our society, but I also wanted it to make a more general case about social infrastructure. And I think that libraries are really just the best form we have of a physical space that invites people to come and be together in ways that turn out to be really crucial. And I also write about parks and about playgrounds, about athletic fields, about schools, and even a little bit about private sector establishments, which can play a role. But I don't think. So I'm an advocate of the coffee shop and the diner and things like that. But do you guys remember this story about what happened in Philadelphia last year in the Starbucks?
Yes.
Two African American guys go into a Starbucks in Philadelphia. Remember this?
Yes.
Has anyone ever had the experience where you go to a meeting and the person you're planning on meeting is late? Has that ever happened to anybody in this room? So how many of you guys got arrested when that happens? Right, that's basically what happened to these guys. They were waiting in Starbucks and they got arrested because they were waiting for their friend to order. And it made me realize that on the one hand, it's great to have commercial establishments, but on the other hand, first of all, not everybody can afford to spend $6 on a coffee, and a lot of people just don't feel welcome in general in places like that. But also, people are very aggressively policed and surveilled, and that's not just people randomly, that's a story about race and racial discrimination that still exists in this country in a very strong way. And so there's something about the radical inclusiveness of the library that I think is especially important and essential for us to champion in a moment like this, because this is the stress test, this moment, right? I mean, this is the real thing. What's happening with our democracy, with the significance of our public spaces. Like, we need places that are radically inclusive and that are accessible to everyone, regardless of how much money they have in their pocket, even when they don't want to spend anything. And I can't think of another institution that is so committed to that project of inclusiveness as the library. And obviously, a great reason for that is the fact that libraries are programmed and run by librarians. Right? This is a story about librarians as much as it is about the library, and I think that needs to be emphasized.
I feel the T-shirt coming up. Radical inclusiveness. At your library.
I like it.
I need some time for a few questions or comments. Now, we have. How are sales going?
How are the sales going? I know the Penguin Random House people are here today. We're really hoping that we make up for any deficiencies after this talk, by the way. So it's very weird to try to sell books to librarians, though. It's like, the whole thing is organized around free books, right? So I don't know quite what to say about it, but I am going to sign books. And at the ALA meeting in Seattle, we're giving away high fives. So I'm willing to do that again. We can give away all the high fives that I can muster today.
Well, I think we have a question here.
Is that a question? Hi there.
Hi. First of all, I love you both, so I just have to say that. I wanted to ask, based on everything we've just discussed, the integral role of public libraries in this moment of the stress test for our country, I'd like to hear how you, Dr. Hayden, maybe especially, think we can have our library schools better prepare librarians for this kind of work. Because I know when I went to library school 10 years ago, and I won't mention where, I really wanted to focus on being a public librarian, and there wasn't a track for that at all. And I had to really carve my own way. And I don't currently work as a public librarian, although I do volunteer at my public library, doing job seeker counseling work. So if you could address that topic.
And it's interesting because I did teach in a library school. It was still a library school, not a high school. It was a library school and public librarianship. And it was about empowerment. And public libraries were these places of inclusiveness. And what I would love to see, and especially if I could get back into academic and teach some classes or just participate in classes, is having books like yours be part of it, to emphasize being able to be that advocate for public libraries and speak the language and translate from libraries to radical inclusive. Well, maybe not radical. Government.
Very, very inclusive is what she means.
Right. But how to do that and to realize that being a public librarian means that you are part of empowering people. We did a lot of that in the 70s and 80s, so I would hope that library schools, high schools, of course technology, but how do you use technology as a tool to empower people? So there's a lot of work that I think library schools.
So that makes sense. I just want to seize upon the first thing you said and let you know that I don't really have permission to do this, but I do want to speak on behalf of New York University to say that when you're ready to come back to the professoriate, we're happy to have you. So
they have their graduations in Yankee Stadium, so that's another thing.
That's happy.
Being part of that and equipping students with the real world. We used to have a thing called 10 things they never teach you in library school. One, how to go to a government meeting and be that advocate. Two, how to train, how to deal with all types of things. There are a lot of things that we could be teaching in library.
Look, I mean, I'm a little partisan on this, but I would like to see library school be more inclusive of sociology. You know, I think, you know, librarians are part, you know, you're part. I mean, you are, I mean, I see you as critical actors in a social experiment, which is this country, and a democratic one as well. And so I think understanding the context that you're working in as well as you can is only going to help you. I think there might be more.
And yes, and getting out of the building.
Thank you both so much. I'm the reference librarian at Public Library in Morgan, and my question is actually asked to all of us. I also serve as a Bangor City Councilor, and when we talk about government, when we talk about what libraries need, we need us in government. We need librarians to run for office. There's a coworker of mine, somewhere who serves on our planning board. So there's so many ways for us to be involved. I obviously can't vote on our library budget for the city, but I'm a part of everything else, and I show that there's other aspects of the library. And so please, we need to run for office at all levels. This is how we fix things. So that's my question.
Wow. Getting at the table, you know, that famous saying, if you're not at the table, you might be on the menu, you know. And getting out and participating, being with your people in your community, going to the school board meetings, all of that. Yeah, being visible in communities and having people say, you're a librarian? Yeah, and I'm here.
No, I like it. Let's make sure we get Mayor Pete and you know, some of the others to keep on writing about libraries. Yeah.
Well, that's my follow-up. How do we get you to get in front of Congress to tell them about this?
Are you talking to the Librarian Congress here? Or are you talking to me?
We need advocates that aren't part of it. That's the thing.
No, I think that's important. Look, so I'm not turning down any invitations from Congress to come and speak on behalf of libraries. I think the question really for all of us is how we do a better job, you know, I'm going to say advocating for the library, but the truth is, like, you know, some people have called this a love letter to the library, this book. I guess it is, but honestly, I didn't write it as a love letter to the library. I wrote it as a social scientist who's trying to analyze what makes our cities work, what makes our communities work, what makes our neighborhoods work, you know, what makes some places collectively strong and some places collectively weak. And doing my analysis, I realized that there's this incredibly powerful institution that, when present and robust, when we invest in it, when we program it, when we keep it open, when we hire the right people, it does magical and extraordinary things. And that institution is the library. So I did this as a work of social science, you know, and a work of analysis, not a work of advocacy. As it happens, you guys are pretty awesome. And you know, and so I think it's been picked up as a work for advocacy, and I want you to use it. But I think all of us need to find a language that works well, that travels outside of our own, you know, parochial local community, to show people what it is that the library can do. And I think the evidence is here, and the question is, you know, making sure that the people who use the library recognize it and don't take it for granted, and people who believe in libraries shout it from the rooftops.
Well, and I'm in development, so what we're doing is sending your vote to our biggest donors,
Yes.
thanking them for making our work possible.
That's
Right,
nice to hear.
and then finding the language. I remember when the book Words at Work came out,
Yeah.
and Valerie Gross, Howard County Public Library, Maryland, gave workshops on translating what we do into language that would be understood outside of the library.
So you say in your talk in your book about asking the question, why don't more public officials recognize the value of libraries? And we're seeing your research, and then also in McGill in Canada, a city planning department, is looking at libraries and their placement in cities. How do you think we encourage more research that gets that focus, that provides us the evidence we need for advocacy?
That's a great question. You know, how do you promote research on the topic? I mean, I think that I'm a bit of an outsider, so I might be getting this wrong, but I have sensed just in the few years that I've been paying attention a growing awareness of the role of libraries in civic life and public life, and a growing interest among academics in trying to understand how libraries fit into that story. I think, frankly, because this is a moment where a lot of us are doing a lot of soul searching, and we feel like these bedrock institutions that, to be honest, we have taken for granted, the democratic institutions, the things that make us who we are at risk. And it's at moments like this that we all need to check in and call attention to essential, critical social infrastructure. And so what I see happening in my academic community is a kind of reawakening and a growing awareness that we have to better understand how core institutions like libraries work. And in a way, I wish I didn't have to be here to say that. I wish my colleagues didn't feel like they had to do that. I wish that our democratic societies were in a healthy and robust enough place where we could take them for granted and deal with other problems, because there's some other issues in the world as well. Yeah? But we're not there now. We are in a major test. And it's not just of the United States and nations around the world. We do not know how democratic the government will be, the society will be, 10 or 15 or 20 years from now. And so we in the academic community, just like you in the policy world or in the world of libraries, have to ask, just what are the most important institutions? And if you look at the most important institutions for democracy right now, if you search for them and you don't see that libraries are very high on the list, you're clearly missing something.